Fila's cheek burned from the slap, but what burned more was seeing her little son, Neo, crying in the corner. Her husband stood there, fists clenched, while her mother-in-law smirked and said, "That's how you control a woman." But what they didn't know was that the hidden CCTV camera caught every second, and soon the whole world would see it too. Fila was the kind of woman every family dreams of. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for everyone in the house. From the moment she married into the family, she gave them her whole heart. She woke up early before anyone else, making sure breakfast was ready. She stayed up late, waiting to serve dinner with a smile. No matter how tired she was, she never complained. She thought if she worked hard and showed love, they would love her back. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. Her mother-in-law would look at her with cold eyes and say, "Is that all you can do?" If she cooked 10 meals, they would find fault in one. If she cleaned the whole house, they would point at the one spot she missed. Her husband, the man she loved and trusted, didn't stand by her. Instead, he listened to his mother and joined in, mocking her. Day after day, Fila felt smaller and smaller, like her worth was tied only to how much she could suffer for them. Even when she fell sick, they didn't care. They piled more work on her, saying, "A good wife doesn't rest." Inside, Fila's heart was breaking, but outside, she kept smiling for the sake of peace. She told herself to be patient, that one day they would see her efforts. But deep down, she knew they didn't want to love her. They wanted to control her. And slowly, the bright, happy woman Fila once was began to fade into someone tired, quiet, and broken. But life was about to change in a way they never expected. At first, Fila thought her mother-in-law would grow to love her. She believed that if she stayed humble and respectful, one day the old woman would smile at her with real warmth. But what Fila didn't know was that deep inside, her mother-in-law's heart was full of jealousy and hatred. You see, Fila's quiet strength, her calm way of handling things, made the old woman feel small. In front of neighbors, people would praise Fila. They would say, "Your daughter-in-law is so hard-working and well-behaved." Instead of feeling proud, the mother-in-law's face would tighten. She couldn't stand hearing Fila get any praise. Little by little, she let that hatred grow. Every chance she got, she whispered poison into her son's ears. "Look at your wife," she would say softly. "She thinks she's better than us. She's too proud. If you don't control her now, she will rule this house one day." At first, her son didn't take it too seriously, but the mother-in-law didn't stop. Every day, every night, she repeated the same things. "She doesn't respect me. She doesn't fear you. A woman like that will bring shame to our family." Her words started to sink deep into his heart like poison. Slowly, he began to see Fila not as his loving wife, but as someone he needed to put in her place. The mother-in-law watched this change with a wicked smile. She felt powerful, knowing she was turning her son against his own wife. Behind closed doors, she planned how to completely break Fila's spirit. "Teach her a lesson," she said one evening. "Let her know who the real boss is in this house." Fila had no idea that the woman she called Mama was setting a trap for her. The tension in the house grew heavier. Small arguments turned into big fights. Her husband, who once held her gently, now looked at her with cold eyes. The love in his heart was being replaced by suspicion and anger, all because of his mother's lies. And the mother-in-law, she sat back and watched, feeling satisfied as her plan slowly worked. But what she didn't know was that fate was watching too. And soon her evil plans would come crashing down in a way she never imagined. It was a simple evening, and Fila was in the kitchen, as always, trying to make everything perfect. She had prepared the food with care, but her mother-in-law found a small fault. "Is this what you call soup? Tasteless, just like you," the old woman spat. Fila lowered her head, swallowing the pain like she always did. But today, her mother-in-law wanted more. She wanted to completely crush Fila's spirit. Her husband came into the room at that moment, tired from work. Before Fila could even greet him, the mother-in-law started her evil whispers again. "Look at the food your wife made. She's mocking us. She's getting too bold, too proud." The man's face turned dark. Fila looked at him with pleading eyes, trying to explain, but the poison had already filled his heart. Then the old woman said the words that broke everything. "Are you a man or not? Teach her a lesson now." And before Fila could even blink, his hand flew through the air and landed hard on her cheek. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. Fila stumbled back, her face burning, not just from the pain, but from the deep betrayal. Her heart shattered into pieces. In the corner, little Neo, their son, stood frozen. His small eyes widened in fear as he watched his father hit his mother. "Mama!" he cried out, but his tiny voice was lost in the heavy silence that followed. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he clung to the wall, shaking. Fila touched her face, her hands trembling. She looked at her husband, but the man she once loved was gone. In his place stood someone cold and heartless. Her mother-in-law smirked, proud of what she had caused. "That's how you control a woman," she said, her voice sharp like a knife. The whole house felt different now, dark, heavy, a place where love had died. Fila's soul broke that day, right in front of her child, right in front of the people she called family. And as Neo cried and Fila stood there in pain, something deep inside her snapped. She knew this was no longer just about her. She had to protect her son, her own heart, her future. But what they didn't know was that someone else had seen everything too. And soon, their evil actions would no longer stay hidden. Something big was coming, something that would shake their world. While Fila stood there with her face burning and her son crying in the corner, no one in that house knew that their darkest moment had been recorded. High up in the living room, hidden in the corner, was a small CCTV camera. It was installed months ago, they said, for security. But now, that little camera had captured everything. The slap, the cruel words, the smirk on the mother-in-law's face, and even the fear in little Neo's eyes. Every second was saved in that camera's memory. Fila herself had almost forgotten about the CCTV, but as she sat alone in her room that night, touching her swollen cheek and listening to her son's soft sobs, something clicked in her mind, a small spark of hope. She remembered the camera. Her heart started beating faster. Could it be? Did it catch what happened? She wiped her tears and stood up. For the first time in a long time, she felt a little strong. Quietly, while the house slept, Fila moved like a shadow. She went to the small monitor connected to the CCTV system. Her hands shook as she searched through the footage, and then she found it, clear as day. The whole scene played out on the screen. Her husband raising his hand, the slap, her mother-in-law's evil smile, her son crying. All of it was there, recorded forever. Fila covered her mouth as tears poured down her face again, but this time they were mixed with a strange relief. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't weak. She had proof, real proof. The camera had seen what the world needed to see. The lies, the abuse, the cruelty. It was no longer hidden. She sat there watching the video over and over, feeling her pain but also feeling something new, power. For so long, they had silenced her, made her feel like nothing. But this video, this small hidden eye in the corner, had caught their truth, and they didn't even know it yet. As the night grew deeper, Fila made a decision. She saved the video on a flash drive, holding it close like treasure. Her heart was pounding, but this time, it was not from fear. It was from courage. She knew now. This was her chance. This was her weapon. They thought they had broken her forever. They thought no one would believe her, but unseen by them all, the camera had captured their shame. And soon, the world would see the truth. The same hand that struck her would face justice. The same voices that mocked her would be silenced. Fila looked at her sleeping son and whispered softly, "Mama will fix everything." The night felt a little less dark because justice had already started moving, quietly but surely, and nothing could stop it. That night, when the whole house was deep in sleep, Fila sat in the dark, wide awake. Her heart was beating fast, but her mind was clear. She knew this was her only chance. If she stayed any longer, things would get worse. Her mother-in-law would keep poisoning her husband's mind. Her husband would keep raising his hand, and little Neo would keep living in fear. No, Fila told herself. Tonight, everything changes. She quietly took the flash drive where she had saved the CCTV footage. She checked it again, just to be sure. Yes, the slap, the insults, the tears, everything was there. It was her proof, her power, her protection. She clutched it tight, like it was her lifeline. Slowly, Fila went to Neo's small bed. He was sleeping peacefully now, his little chest rising and falling. She felt her heart break again, knowing how much pain this innocent child had seen. She gently touched his face and whispered, "We are leaving, my son. Mama will keep you safe now." Phila moved quickly but carefully. She grabbed a small bag and packed only what was needed: some clothes, important papers, and a little money she had secretly saved over the years. She didn't take much. She didn't care about gold, gifts, or fancy things. All she wanted was freedom and safety for her and her son. As she packed, every small sound made her freeze. She was scared someone might wake up, her husband, her mother-in-law, and stop her. But she forced herself to keep going. She had come too far to turn back now. Finally, she wrapped Neo in a warm blanket and carried him in her arms. The boy stirred, but didn't wake up. Phila kissed his forehead, tears running down her cheeks. She looked around the house one last time. This place, where she had suffered so much, where her smile had died little by little, she was leaving it behind, forever. With her heart pounding like a drum, Phila stepped outside. The night air was cold, but it felt fresh, like a new beginning. She walked fast, her eyes darting around, afraid someone would call her back. But no one came. No one knew. She reached the gate and stepped out into the street. And just like that, Phila had escaped. She didn't know exactly where she would go yet, but she knew one thing: she was free now. And with the CCTV footage in her hand, she had the power to fight back. Her story was not over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the people who thought they had broken her, they were about to see a side of Phila they never imagined. The next morning, the world woke up to a storm. A shocking video had appeared on the internet, and within minutes, it was everywhere. People on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they were all talking about it. The video showed a woman being slapped hard by her husband while a cruel mother-in-law stood by and smiled. The woman cried, her little child watching in fear. Every word, every slap, every tear, it was all there, clear and painful. Nobody knew who leaked the video, but everyone felt the same thing: anger and heartbreak. At first, people were shocked. Then they got furious. Influencers with millions of followers started sharing it. They said, "This is what too many women go through in silence. Enough is enough." Women's rights groups picked it up fast. They made loud statements, demanding justice for the woman in the video. News channels showed the footage again and again, asking, "Who are these people? How could they do this?" Comments flooded in from every corner. People cursed the husband. They called the mother-in-law a monster. Strangers, men and women, cried for the woman who suffered so much. Hashtags like #Justice for Phila and #Stop Domestic Violence started trending worldwide. The whole internet had exploded with support. Meanwhile, inside the abusive family's home, chaos broke out. The husband and his mother couldn't believe what was happening. Their faces were on every phone screen, every TV channel. Neighbors started whispering. Friends stopped calling. Business partners backed away. Even people in their own family turned their backs in shame. The family tried to deny it at first. They said, "It's fake, it's edited." But the video was too real, too raw. Nobody believed their lies. The public wanted punishment. They wanted the husband arrested. They wanted the mother-in-law exposed. Pressure started building on the police and authorities to take action. For Phila, watching all this from a safe place, tears filled her eyes. But this time, they were tears of relief. After years of silent suffering, the world finally saw her pain, and they stood with her. She was no longer alone. The internet was boiling with rage, but also with love and support for her. Strangers called her strong, brave, and a fighter. They prayed for her and her child. Offers of help poured in. Lawyers, shelters, counselors, even kind strangers who just wanted to help. The abusive family, who once felt powerful and untouchable, was now trapped under the weight of public anger. Their dark secrets were no longer hidden, and the sweet taste of justice had just begun. Audiences everywhere felt proud of Phila. They rooted for her comeback, and deep inside they knew this woman's story was far from over. The best part was still to come. The downfall for Phila's husband and mother-in-law came faster than they expected. The video that had once been a secret now felt like a curse. It didn't take long for the consequences to hit. The husband, once respected in his career, was called into his boss's office. His reputation had been shattered. The video, showing him slapping his wife in front of their child, was everywhere. His boss, who had once trusted him, had no choice but to let him go. The phone call that he dreaded came true. He was fired. No one wanted to be associated with a man like that. His career was over. At home, the situation only got worse. People who used to respect him now called him a coward. They sent messages, left hurtful comments, and made sure he knew they would never forgive him. But the real shock came from the people closest to him. His friends and relatives, the same people who had once praised him, now turned their backs. His own family started distancing themselves. They didn't want to be seen with someone so cruel. They didn't want to be linked to an abuser. His mother, the woman who had always believed she could control everything, felt the world crumbling beneath her. People in the community who had once admired her now whispered behind her back. The mothers she used to chat with at church, the neighbours who'd smile at her in the grocery store, all began to avoid her. Her pride, which had once been unshakable, was now in pieces. She tried to defend herself, saying, "It was just a mistake. It's all been blown out of proportion." But no one was buying her excuses. She became a symbol of cruelty and manipulation in the eyes of everyone around her. Even the people who had once respected her started to look at her with disgust. Their once perfect world had turned into a nightmare. Their house, which was filled with pride and false confidence, now felt like a prison. Every glance from a neighbour felt like an accusation. Friends who used to come over for coffee now avoided their calls. The shame followed them everywhere. Both the husband and the mother-in-law began to realise that they could no longer live in the world they had once known. The truth was out, and the respect they had worked so hard to maintain was gone. No amount of money or power could undo the damage. Their pride had crumbled, and now they were facing the consequences of their actions. The world knew who they were now, and there was no going back. Fila, the woman they had tried to break, had become their worst nightmare. They had underestimated her strength, and now they were paying the price. The respect they once had was replaced with shame. They were no longer in control, and the public was watching, waiting for the next chapter of this story. After everything that happened, Fila was no longer the quiet, suffering woman she used to be. She became a symbol of strength, resilience, and courage. The world saw her differently now, and so did she. The footage of her abuse had sparked something in her. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no other woman had to endure what she did. Her story went viral, and soon, Fila was receiving support from all corners. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that focused on women's rights reached out to her, offering resources and help. They wanted to back her up in her mission to fight for abused women everywhere. She became the face of the movement, speaking out about domestic violence and showing women that they could fight back. The media started calling her for interviews. At first, she was nervous, unsure of what to say, but the more she spoke, the more she realized how important her voice had become. She wasn't just telling her story anymore, she was giving hope to women who were still suffering in silence. Every interview she did, every article written about her, was a step toward changing the narrative around domestic abuse. Fila was no longer the victim. She was the voice of those who couldn't speak out. With her newfound strength and platform, Fila decided to start a small foundation dedicated to helping other women escape abusive situations. She used the money from her interview and the donations pouring in from people who admired her to set up safe houses, provide legal help, and give emotional support to those in need. Her foundation became a lifeline for women trapped in abusive relationships. Fila knew exactly what it felt like to be stuck, to feel powerless, and she wanted to make sure no woman ever had to feel that way again. Her transformation inspired millions. From the broken woman who once stood helpless in her own home, she became a powerful leader. People admired her courage and her commitment to making a difference. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every woman who felt silenced and afraid. Her rise from victim to national hero was a story of hope, proving that it's never too late to take control of your life and stand up for what's right. Viewers, especially women, started to look up to her as a role model. Her journey gave them the courage to speak up, to seek help, and to believe that they could change their own situations too. Fila had become not just a survivor, but a beacon of hope for women everywhere, showing them that no matter how bad things get, there is always a way out, and there is always strength to rise again. It was a day Fila never thought would come. Her husband, the man who had hurt her in front of their son, and her mother-in-law, the one who had pulled the strings, came to her with their heads down. They stood at her door, their eyes filled with guilt and shame. The world had turned against them, and now they were desperate. They had lost everything, their reputation, their social standing, and even the respect they once had from their family and friends. All they wanted now was to fix things, to rebuild their public image. And they knew the only way to do that was to get Fila's forgiveness. Her husband's voice trembled as he begged, "Fila, please. I was wrong. We were wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. Forgive me, for the sake of our family." His mother, who had once ordered him to slap Fila, now stood behind him, pleading with her eyes. "Please, Fila, we are sorry. It's all over now. Just let this go, for Neo." But Fila wasn't the same woman who had silently suffered. She had found her voice, and she wasn't about to let them think they could erase everything they had done with a simple apology. She stood tall, her face calm but firm. She had learned that forgiveness was not something to give easily, especially not after the pain they had caused her. She had seen how they had manipulated her, used her, and tried to control her. Their words now felt empty, and Fila wasn't about to let them use her again. With unwavering confidence, she looked them in the eye and said, "Forgiveness is between me and God. Justice is between you and the law." Those words hit harder than any slap. The power in her voice, the strength in her heart, was undeniable. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about justice. They had to face the consequences of their actions, and Fila wasn't going to be their escape route. The moment she spoke those words, it was like everything changed. The video of her response went viral. People cheered for Fila, sharing her words and praising her strength. Her answer was everything the world needed to hear. A message that forgiveness wasn't a free pass, that sometimes justice had to come before anything else. Her powerful line became a symbol of standing up for yourself, of not letting anyone take advantage of your kindness. And as for her husband and mother-in-law, their plea for forgiveness only deepened their shame, and they realized too late that Fila had already moved on. Fila stood by the window, looking out at the life she had built for herself and her son. Neo, now a little older, was playing in the corner, his laughter filling the air. It was a sound she hadn't heard in so long, the sound of peace, the sound of freedom. She had endured so much for years, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, but at what cost? Her silence had cost her dignity, her happiness, and the love she deserved. But now, it was different. She had broken free from the chains of manipulation and abuse. Turning to Neo, she smiled softly. Her heart swelled with a love so deep, so powerful, that nothing could ever shake it again. Neo was her world, her reason for standing tall, for surviving. With him by her side, Fila had found the strength to do what once seemed impossible, to reclaim her life and her voice. Looking into his innocent eyes, Fila spoke words that had been a long time coming. "I stayed silent once, never again. For you, I'll fight every battle." Those words were a promise, not just to Neo, but to herself. She had learned that standing up for herself was not just about protecting her own happiness, but about showing her son that no one had the right to treat them they were less than. The house they now called home wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of the new life she was building, one where she was in control, where she didn't have to hide her strength or her dreams. As she closed the door behind her, Fila knew this was just the beginning. She was no longer the woman who had suffered in silence. She was the woman who had found her voice, her power, and her purpose. She had taken back everything that was hers, and no one would ever take it away again. Fila's journey wasn't just about escaping her past. It was about creating a future filled with love, strength, and freedom. And as she walked into her new life with Neo, she knew that no matter what battles lay ahead, she would always have the courage to face them, for herself, for Neo, and for every woman who needed to hear her story. The audience watched, moved by the transformation, the strength, and the courage that Fila embodied. It was a story of survival, of redemption, and of the power that comes from standing up for what's right. The kind of story that would stay with them long after the screen went dark.